Uh, my name is Mead Treadwell. I'm chair of this Arctic Policy Study Group at Commonwealth North, which is updating about a 10-year-old report called Why the Arctic Matters. And we are assisted in this by a number of different think tanks and organizations, including the Institute of the North, the Arctic Domain Awareness Center, Arctic Today, the Wilson Center's Polar Institute, the Polar Research and Policy Institute. And I'd like to thank those institutions and our co-chairs for this group. One of the almost inescapable conclusions of this study will be that we need to improve our relationships with our neighbors in the Arctic. And our closest neighbor in the Arctic is Yukon Territory. And I'm really delighted today that Vice Premier, Deputy Premier Ranj Pillai, who can join us. Vice Premier, I've had the chance to meet with you in your office talking about railroads, talking about Arctic issues. We know you to be an advocate for sustainable mining, sustainable transportation, and we're very delighted to have you here today. I want to apologize. You see palm trees behind me in this discussion on the Arctic. I'm just getting on an airplane to come home after doing some family business in the South. And I'm going to turn off my camera and hand it back to you, Juanetta. But I did want to thank the Deputy Premier for joining us today, and I'll be listening in with my camera off.
Okay, thank you so much, Mead. All right. Well, now it is, we're very pleased to welcome to today's program the Honorable Raj Pillay to offer a presentation on the Yukon. Deputy Premier Pillay was elected to the Yukon Legislative Assembly in the general election in November of 2016 as a member of the Legislative Assembly for Porter Creek South. Along with being Deputy Premier, he is also Minister of Energy, Mines and Resources, Minister of Economic Development, Minister responsible for the Yukon Development Corporation, and Minister responsible for the Yukon Energy Corporation. He is a longtime Yukonner with a background working with NGOs, government, and the private sector. Deputy Premier Pillay previously sat as a City of Whitehorse councillor and was instrumental in bringing Hockey Day in Canada to the city in 2011. Please join me in welcoming Deputy Premier Raj Pillay. Deputy Premier.
Good morning, everyone. I'm fighting for, there's some other very important things happening. I just noticed I came out of a meeting. So if I'm going to say, listen, if you have two screens on, everyone, I understand. And I've taped it so I can watch when I get home after work. Thank you to Mead and Juanetta for organizing this important forum to talk about issues. So I do appreciate it. Of course, Alaska is a warm place in my heart. We were very concerned over the last couple of months with what happened in Haines. Those are they're our friends, they're our neighbors. We have family there. We want to make sure everything's good in Haines because we love playing basketball against them in the final of our Yukon Lights Out basketball tournament every year, and even old folks like me like to get to play against those great American athletes. And in my time in City Council, we always sent delegates to the Southeast Conference. One of my fondest memories of being in Alaska, having an opportunity to watch political debates in a school gymnasium in Petersburg, and what a lovely area, just so exceptional. And always love spending time in Fairbanks and Anchorage. And there's just so much opportunity for us and for you folks to be doing things together, whether it's around food security. We're in the same position as you. We know how much food gets shipped into Alaska as well as into the Yukon, and we're around the same percentage. There's a lot of opportunity. And as well, just on the industrial side. And Mead, great to see you. Yes, I am. I noticed those palm trees. Always great to see you. I think back to that conference and the first time I had an opportunity to see you in your previous roles. And absolutely, we have been in steady discussions concerning A2A as we've moved along. We're on the traditional territory here today of the Colin Dunn First Nation, the Tonquetchin Council. So respectfully thank them. And again, on behalf of Premier Silver and the government of Yukon, thanks for the chance to share some of our views and priorities. While we cannot meet in person due to COVID-19, I'm glad that we can still come together virtually. Today is a big day, of course, for the U.S., and we will be watching the inauguration with interest. I offer my best wishes for renewed cooperation in American democratic institutions. As we approach the first anniversary of the border closure, I want to share that we miss our friends and our neighbors in Alaska, particularly, of course, in Haines and Skagway, as I mentioned, and as our communities and economies are so integrated. Although we have been able to find ways to stay connected and continue to work virtually, it does not replace the experience of visiting and supporting local businesses in person, whether here at the Rendezvous Festival in Whitehorse, at 4th of July festivals in Skagway, or at the Southeast Alaska State Fair in Haines, Alaska. For now, though, I want to outline some of our government's priorities, which include our economic recovery plan, mineral development in Yukon's clean energy strategy. I also want to speak about areas of interest to both Yukon and Alaska, such as our Arctic policy, Skagway ore terminal, the A2A railway concept, and telecommunications. First, I want to provide an update on the COVID-19 situation in Yukon and how our health protocols and vaccination strategies will frame out our work in the post-pandemic world. We remain vigilant and continue to follow guidance from our medical professionals and the Chief Medical Officer of Health. We are currently in phase 3 of our plan for lifting COVID-19 restrictions, which means our businesses are open, kids are attending school in person, and our essential services continue to operate. As of the most recent report today, and folks have continued to update, so we have 0 active cases right now, and 70 total cases and one death over the last year. We take this pandemic very seriously, and that's why we continue to maintain public health measures in place to keep Yukoners safe. We know how quickly this virus can spread and cause havoc, overload hospitals, and close down businesses. And thankfully, Yukon received priority vaccine allocations, and we are working towards vaccinating 75% of eligible Yukoners in early 2021. Our dedicated team of health professionals have already started administering vaccines to vulnerable people and frontline workers. As of the most recent reporting, just over 1,300 people have received their first dose of Moderna vaccine, which began arriving at the end of last week. I think we have teams right now today that are moving to Beaver Creek, so right on the border going into Alaska, making sure that community receives their first dosage. Each new shipment keeps us moving forward with our COVID-19 vaccine strategy. While we have been fortunate to limit the spread of COVID-19, we have implemented many measures similar to other places in Canada and Alaska. A 2-week isolation requirement is in place for anyone entering Yukon from another country, province, or territory. Masks are required in all public indoor spaces, and Alaskan travelers are permitted to transit through the territory for essential purposes. The majority of Alaskan travelers have been incredibly respectful of our measures, and we thank them for their patience. We feel very fortunate to enjoy open spaces and low case numbers, although we remain concerned as numbers grow steadily in much of Canada. Our plan is meant to safely guide us towards reopening our economy, and it has been successful so far. We continue vaccinations and work with our health. We will continue vaccinations and work with our health and government partners to keep Yukoners safe. Around our economy, in the midst of this pandemic, we have remained committed to growing and diversifying our economy. Some industries, such as tourism and hospitality, have felt the effects of COVID-19 and has, of course, made their lives very difficult in that particular sector. However, Yukon's overall economy continues to be a leader in Canada. In December 2020, our adjusted unemployment rate was 8.5% compared to the rest of Canada. So that's a 3-month rolling and adjusted based on the numbers we had before. Across the board, we are in a position where we're, it's the lowest unemployment rate in the country, and we're actually our unemployment rate is now about 6%. So we've seen some, and that's sort of this time of year. Same with Alaska, you would see sort of some anomalies within the growth, but we've essentially had the lowest unemployment rate in the country for 4 years straight, and that's carried on. That said, we know that some Yukoners and businesses are continuing to need support. Our government has helped with various programs, including the Yukon Business Relief Program, which offers non-repayable grants to cover specific fixed costs for businesses affected by the pandemic. There is a special funding for arts-related initiatives struggling with impacts of COVID-19, and paid sick leave rebates are available for employers, and 4-day unpaid leave regulations help Yukoners protect, of course, their health while they're waiting for testing results. Before the pandemic, Yukon did have the lowest unemployment rate in the country at 3.6% in 2019, and we had a historic low in 2018 of 2.3%. Yukon's strong labor market is pushing up household incomes and drawing newcomers to the territory. Our population grew for 16 consecutive years and reached just over 42,000 in March of 2020. Our real GDP increased by 1% in 2019, followed by a 3.2% increase in 2018. Consumer spending and retail sales were a record $865 million in 2019. Unfortunately, responding to the pandemic slowed the economy, with overall sales declining between January and May. However, there continues to be positive economic markers, including $65 million in real estate transactions during the first quarter of 2020. And Yukon's economy was strong before COVID-19 and remains resilient. As of this week, just a quick snapshot, lowest unemployment in the country, very significant growth in the residential market for housing, record year for permits, as well as lots that we're putting out in the city of Whitehorse. Wholesale now in Q4 or Q3, again, really significant growth. So across the board for all our data points, pretty excited. And again, 2 jurisdictions in the entire country with positive GDP growth, us and then the bookend of the north and the Arctic being Nunavut. So pretty happy to be able to see it, even though we understand what's happening with tourism, being able to see that growth. Of course, like you folks on the mining and resource development front, high mineral prices and record high gold prices affirm that mining will continue to be a bright spot in our economy. Of course, mining is a cornerstone of our economy here and on the private sector side, and provides significant employment and development opportunities for Yukoners. Even as markets have slowed, industry and mine operations have been stable, and Yukon remains one of the best jurisdictions in the world for development. We worked with Victoria Gold and Minto Exploration to keep the mines open throughout the pandemic as essential industry operations. These 2 projects contribute approximately $300 million annually to our economy. Placer gold production as well in the Dawson area and south of that capitalized on recent historic gold prices and low fuel prices to produce the most gold production in 23 years. So about $170 million just in placer operations over this past summer. The territory hosts 2 hard rock mines, with the 3rd projected to come online, and actually did come online on Friday. The first shipment of silver concentrate was shipped to Skagway, Alaska on Friday from our Alexco, which is Canada's newest and only primary silver mine. Each project produces different commodities, providing diversity to our annual resource production. Eagle Gold's project began commercial production in June of 2020 after pouring its first gold bar in September of 2019. The Eagle Gold project production is a major driver of GDP over Yukon's forecast period. And in 2019, Minto also restarted. So right now we're in a situation where we have 3 producing projects, and we have 2 projects on the horizon, one owned by Newmont and the other one held by a private company called BMC. So those are the next sort of on the horizon, and one is a primary gold, and the other one is a base metal zinc project. So those are sort of what we see on the horizon. There's and potential restarts on some other projects that have been essentially mothballed. They're gone through reclamation, but they're still, with these new commodity prices, seems to be some real opportunity. Of course, we've always worked with folks in Alaska at Delta Junction to build capacity here. So we have that relationship with the Center for Northern Innovation and Mining. Again, we closely watch what's happening, and congratulations to you on how the Fraser Institute has looked at Alaska as a destination for exploration. Again, we watched closely throughout the spring as well about how you handled your alternative isolation and some of your planning, because we were folks there as well as here, we are in a pretty robust exploration season, and it means so much to both your state and our territory. On the tourism side, the government of Yukon has actively engaged local tourism industry and our federal counterparts to navigate the challenging impacts of the pandemic has had on tourism. With the support of the Yukon Tourism Advisory Board, which is an industry-led board, we continue to focus on relief efforts and have partnered with the Tourism Industry Association of Yukon to assess needs and identify any gaps in relief funding. We are continuing to engage with tourism businesses, Yukon First Nations, nonprofit organizations, and other partners on the recovery initiatives required to return the industry to sustainable growth, so we can again welcome Alaskans and travelers to Alaska over the next number of years. On the climate change side, a lot of work done here over the last number of years as we continue to develop our mineral industry. We remain focused on fighting climate change. We are balancing community development, environmental stewardship, and industry investment for a long-term sustainable development. Our northern climate is warming 3 times faster than the rest of Canada, with carbon pollution continues growing around the world at an alarming rate. Our government understands this is one of the biggest challenges facing our generation, and we want to do our part. This is why this fall we released Yukon's 10-year strategy for addressing climate change, energy, and a green economy called Our Clean Future. It sets out our collective vision, goals, values, objectives to address the climate change emergency. Yukon First Nations, transboundary Indigenous groups, and municipalities joined us to develop the strategy's vision, values, and objectives. Over the next 10 years, the government of Yukon, in partnership with the government of Canada, will invest $500 million in climate change and energy programs and initiatives. Over $400 million of this will directly support economic development and recovery by investing in local renewable energy, infrastructure, building projects, and encouraging purchases of zero-emission vehicles, and supporting Yukon businesses and workers to develop new skills for the green economy. The plan is a roadmap to increasing renewable electricity on Yukon's main grid to 97% on average by 2030. It's an ambitious goal of reaching net zero emissions for Yukon's entire economy by 2050. We are now working with Yukon First Nation governments, municipalities, community-based organizations to make meaningful investments in renewable energy projects so that we can achieve our goals. These initiatives enable the development of small-scale energy generation projects based on solar, wind, biomass, geothermal, hydro technologies to power our homes, businesses, and economy. Our government, again, has already worked closely with project partners to advance a number of initiatives across our territory, such as solar array in northern Yukon to reduce use of diesel fuel, biomass district heating systems to heat buildings, development of a megawatt wind farm in Whitehorse, and several other solar projects, as well as wind projects. Very key for us is when you folks look at, we're all moving towards the ESG financing model. Very important for us as we continue to focus on our minerals industry to ensure that we have a clean grid to feed into that. And, as we work with bankers on Bay Street, our version of Wall Street, of course, this is what we hear. We know that our climate change strategy is actually going to be foundational for mining growth. 10-year renewable electricity plan as well, which we've been working on, we'll see over 90% of Yukon's electricity needs coming from renewable electricity, hydroelectricity. Remaining energy needs will be supplemented with thermal power generation to provide additional support during the winter months. The Arctic Energy Fund, which we've put in place, provided by the federal government to support energy security, has budgeted about $50 million as well for our communities for independent power production projects. One of our innovative initiatives is the independent power production policy. So something we worked on very quickly at the start of this mandate. And really what it does, it enables individuals and organizations to become independent power producers and sell electricity to our utility. Our microgeneration policy also allows individuals to implement small-scale generation projects from renewable sources and sell unused electricity to the grid. The program's high adoption rate has led to the development in locally sourced renewable energy and created new business opportunities, especially within solar energy sector. At the end of 2020, there were over 345 microgenerators connected to the Yukon utility grid, generating enough energy to supply almost 1% of Yukon's total electricity generation in 2019. Microgeneration participants include 9 Yukon First Nations, First Nation Development Corporations, which have installed more than 26 solar energy generating systems since 2014. Yukon is a jurisdiction with considerable potential for energy and renewable energy development. And we are interested in reducing energy costs and see the potential of additional renewable energy projects as we move to diversify our energy development and transmission. Our government understands that our future success depends on transitioning to a green economy through innovation and adaptation. On the Arctic policy front, we look forward to a close cooperation as we consider engaging with the Arctic Council, the Arctic Economic Council, and other bodies for international cooperation. As we have those discussions, the federal government is proceeding with the new Arctic policy and Northern policy framework, which was created with input from provinces and territories. The framework reflects the unique interests, priorities, and circumstances of the North. It is the first framework of this scope to be co-developed with Indigenous, territorial, and provincial partners, and demonstrates Canada's commitment to working collaboratively. This inclusive approach will extend to implementation. Through the framework, Canada is supporting international cooperation, rules-based order in the Arctic. We're going to touch on just some key things for us as well. The Port of Skagway is the main export terminal for minerals extracted in Yukon, with just under 500 million of ore shipped over the last 5 years. The continued viability of the ore export terminal in Southeast Alaska is of critical importance to the long-term sustainability of Yukon's mineral exploration and extraction industry. With Minto Mine ramping up production and Alesko now online, we expect increased demand for access to the facilities. We also recognize the increased demand on the ore terminal requires modern infrastructure that can handle the demand in a manner that meets the needs of users as well as the municipality and residents of Skagway. Collaboration on the future of the port facilities is a great example of the day-to-day work that reveals just how closely connected our communities are. And recognizing this interconnectedness, the municipality of Skagway had the foresight to offer our government a seat at the table for the newly constituted Ports and Harbors Advisory Board. So we thank them for this, and we look forward to collaborating with the municipality on the future of not just the ore terminal, but also the port activities related to tourism, transportation, and the shipment of goods that are important for both communities. We're also speaking with the Alaska Industrial Development and Export Authority, AIDA, and the owners of the ore loader facility in Skagway on ways in which we could partner on solutions for modern, sustainable infrastructure that provides benefits to all our communities. Of course, the COVID-19 pandemic has taken a very big toll on the health of our communities and the physical and mental health of our communities. So although our border between us remains closed, our ability to work together on the post-pandemic recovery for our integrated communities, again, remains a priority. Really key, we're looking at all options on the ore terminal. It's so important to us. When we speak globally to investors, we always touch on the fact that we're so close to tidewater. The mayor has been great in Skagway. We continue to look at all options with AIDA, but if there's one thing as a priority to take away from today for us, this is extremely important that we have a solution and a partnership in place. We have more projects coming online, and it's key. It's absolutely key for us that infrastructure is in place. The Minister of Export for Canada is Minister Mary Ng. She's aware as well of our keen interest in continuing to have access to tidewater and continuing to provide Alaska with economic opportunities through that export. ATA, as we touched on, I have met with Mead and others, and so a safe energy transportation is always important as we plan our recovery. The Alberta to Alaska Railway is generating plenty of interest, and of course we look forward to learning more as the application to assessment gets built out. Early engagement with First Nations is critical, and I want to applaud everyone involved in the outreach activities that are already underway. While we have yet to conduct a significant assessment of the project, we know that a project of this magnitude will be informed by communication from Yukoners, federal government, and other Canadian jurisdictions. So we look forward to learning more about the ATA route, and we've been the team's been very flexible on the ATA side of hearing us out, and we've had some studies and work done, and we've shared all of that information with the A2A team and just have them look at that project in a multitude of different ways. And I want to commend them on hiring local Yukon expertise to guide them. They've picked up some really good team members as well right here in the Yukon. So I think that's key as well. So to look at to understand the ground game that they're dealing with here. Telecommunications capabilities, of course, here in the North all need improvement, and especially as our citizens need online services more than ever. It's also key part of supporting economic development and helping community businesses to thrive. Currently, there is a 800-kilometer fiber optic line under construction to connect Yukon through the Northwest Territories along the Dempster Highway. In addition, the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications, the CRTC, recently approved SpaceX application to add high-speed satellite services. Change is coming, and we want to work with our internet providers to find solutions that best meet the needs of citizens here in the North. Infrastructure corridors, including telecommunications, are areas that we have shared interest, as high-speed internet will increase economic opportunities. And of course, there was a line built just in the last number of years, and that takes us right down the Alaska Highway, some key pieces. I'm going to ask I've got staff here. I know I've added in some stuff. I want to be respectful to the folks. We have some more stuff. How are we doing on time? Because we could go to question and answer too. I want the best use of time for our friends on the phone.
Sure, we're at 10:27, and I'm sure.
2 minutes.
Yeah, I'm sure they'd be interested in hearing your.
Okay, I'll share a little bit more, and then you can just give me a nod. I want to make sure. Okay, so I think some of the key issues too. I just wanted to talk a little bit about maritime traffic in the Arctic, and this is really, of course, extremely important. I spent some time this year on the Beaufort. Went up there specifically with my concerns around economic development, geopolitical change, and that area. So it was right on the Alaska border, a very remote place on Herschel Island. But yes, we have a keen interest. We see sea ice decline in the Arctic, which means we can expect more maritime traffic in the years ahead. We know there is an interest for decreased transportation or increased transportation infrastructure, including a deep water port and other ideas. There's also rapidly growing interest in the Arctic from around the world, including from China, Russia, and other European and Asian nations. Our considerations regarding Arctic waters will be informed by engaging with other jurisdictions, including our federal government. We know major changes are happening, and as we experience climate change, the closer cooperation will be needed in the future. So we can chat a bit about that in the Q&A. On community development, I think we'll just touch on closer to home here. Yukon is also focused on building the foundations for healthy communities. So we're investing in education with the creation of new modern schools. We have new hospitals and healthcare facilities in Whitehorse, Dawson City, and Watson Lake. We're moving forward on our Putting People First plan to revamp our healthcare system, following recommendations from an independent expert panel that was conducted over this past year. So Putting People First contains 76 recommendations, all endorsed by our government, which aim to improve services, offer better value for money, and improve health outcomes for patients, families, and healthcare workers. We're committed to moving Yukon towards a more holistic, person-centered, focused on social determinants of health, preventative healthcare, and community involvement. And we know that building safe, affordable communities with effective healthcare and quality education options will attract even more entrepreneurs, explorers, professionals to our unique society. A lot of our work on this was adapted from concepts in Alaska. So I know that they did a lot of work and looked at many best practices from your home, and they've been integrated into our health plan moving forward. The government of Yukon, again, on a reconciliation with our Indigenous governments, has been committed to strengthening relations with Yukon First Nations and exploring partnership and opportunities that benefit Yukoners and help diversify and grow our economy. First Nations-led renewable energy projects are underway across the territory, which will benefit all Yukoners. We've negotiated about a half a dozen project agreements to build new road access into a number of high mineral potential areas, and we're working hand in hand with First Nations on that work. Another quick snapshot, we're just working through implementing a new procurement policy for Yukon First Nations, again, looking at best practices to Alaska on how you look at certification and validation for these partners and joint ventures and how we can learn from you. We're addressing the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls national inquiry calls for justice. We've been a leader in the country on that file with Minister McLean here in our women's director. Last year, the Yukon Advisory Committee developed a Yukon strategy that seeks to change the story for Indigenous women, girls, and LGBTQ2S+ Yukoners. Addressing these issues means more work and reforms in areas of policing and corrections. We want to improve policing in a way that is more respectful, fair, and recognizes historic and modern injustices. We're also integrating Yukon First Nation ways of knowing and doing into our approach to learning and ensuring more involvement from First Nations in developing our approach to education. This past year, we are proud to officially launch Yukon University. Of course, the only country in the Arctic that didn't have a university above the 60th parallel. Was exciting for us. A great institution. Want to see more Alaskans choosing to come to school here and use that reciprocal agreement we have on tuition, just as we have students that move over to Alaska for their post-secondary education. Yukon University is Canada's first university in the North, for the North, and by the North. We also celebrated Yukon University's introduction of a Made in Yukon Bachelor of Arts in Indigenous Governance degree program, and we're investing $30 million to modernize schools across the territory. We're fully support meaningful engagement on Indigenous peoples and economic self-determination and Arctic policies. This again is an exciting time for our territory as we work together to create new post-secondary education, social, and economic opportunities for the Yukon. I think I'm going to stop there and open it up to questions at this point. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to share some of those ideas and thoughts and perspective with you today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Deputy Premier Pillai. Mead, I see that you're still with us, and I'm just wondering if you wanted to open with any questions while you're still here. Okay, with that, let me just remind the audience that you can submit any questions through the chat at any time. Please try and keep your questions concise to help me with that process. Deputy Premier Pillai, I wanted to say that congratulations, particularly on the circumstances with COVID and your territories and government's opportunities to keep that under very tight control. As you're looking forward, I mean, there are many things, many consequences that have become evident as a part of COVID-19 and some of the restrictions that have been in place globally. With respect to broadband deployment in your territory, what percentages of schools now have access, would you say, to adequate broadband to be able to supply distance delivery education in the future?
You know, I think I would say that the majority of our schools are in that position. We have one community in the far north, neighbors of yours in Old Crow, which is a fly-in community. It's our only fly-in community. But you know, like we've learned, and I don't have an extensive background on your community post-secondary infrastructure, but for us, there's always been distance learning has been a model that Yukon College used for decades. You know, it was done in a not as a sophisticated way as we are on calls today, but there was always that that pipeline. So you'd have an instructor in Whitehorse delivering anything from a diploma program, certificate program, right to an MA, and you would be able to do that through teleconference. And so the sort of culture was there already to be able to do that. But I think, we've done upgrades over the last number of years, but I guess the exciting thing I'd share with you is over the last year, we teamed up with our telecommunications company, Northwest Tel, and we were granted, there was a grant that was given for people in the north that had landlines. the federal agency, the CRTC, pulled that back and said, look, everybody's using cell phones. You don't need to get an offset on your monthly costs for landlines. But we have $800 million. The North can apply first. We applied for that money, supported the application. And so we are looking at having the most connected province or territory in the country in the next 36 months, pending any slowdown from COVID in 2021. So we're looking at fiber to 90 to 95% of the homes, not just our schools and college campuses. So we're in very good shape for our infrastructure, our broadband connectivity. And then, as I touched on, this line that we're building is so important because it's 777 kilometers, really technical, 1,100 water crossings. It's an undertaking, but it's actually going to give redundancy to the entire north of our country, which we didn't have. What a lot of people don't know is that we have a line break here that can affect the other part, the east part of the Arctic and on the other side of North America. So it's going to be important for the north, but also important for us. And we've been back and forth with companies in Alaska. I mean, the line was built from Alaska down to Haines Junction. That was, I think, more of an opportunity in adding value for the Alaskan company that was there. But at the same time, truly now we're in redundancy. We haven't struck a contract, or our telecoms have not, with the Alaskan company, but we actually are going to be very short up on redundancy, which means we can get inward investment on a digital sense. We always have looked at things like server farms and stuff like that, but we have sat and danced with people around those concepts. But if you don't have redundancy, a major company is not going to put a server farm in your backyard. They love the climate because the cost is about really heating them, cooling them. I'm sorry, so it's easy to cool, and of course we've got lots of solar. So I think we're positioned well, and we'll be a leader in our country 3 to 4 years out, and that's including all of our southern neighbors. So that's kind of where we're at on broadband.
Great, thank you so much. We'd like to congratulate you also on the development of the Yukon University, and wondering if there's any conversations with the University of the Arctic system to integrate and partner with that system.
Yeah, I would probably leave it to my colleagues at the university to give a more thorough answer on that. I mean, what we've seen is there has been visitation from Arctic counterparts over the last couple of years, and there has been a great relationship, really, by the last president, Karen Barnes, that saw that value in making sure that we understood our potential opportunity around University of the Arctic. Of course, there's a long history at the institution previously, I think, of being quite active. And I know that they just named President Barnes as President Emeritus. So part of that is to keep her relationship with us. I think she's going to be playing a bigger role across the North. She spent a lot of time working not just in Canada, consulting with other territories, but also in Scandinavia. Ken Coates, who is a great leader in our country, happens to be from Whitehorse, still has a home here. And he's very key as well in some of that work. So I think now that we have the university in place, we're in a better position now that we've struck that level. We've always done really well on research dollars. We compete with the biggest institutions in the country, which has been extraordinary. Of course, where we're positioned geographically gives us advantage for joint ventures with other institutions. But yes, I think we're going to see more of a role. But again, the pace and time, I leave that to the board at Yukon University and the president that's in place right now.
Wonderful, thank you. Another question, pre-pandemic, of course, your unemployment rate was quite low, and even under current circumstances, you've managed to at least maintain a low level within your country, and something I think we're in Alaska very similar in the low 8 percentile range. But with your mining sector and the support sectors that are needed to prosecute the mining industry There's a great need for post-secondary training, technical training, skilled trades. Can you speak to what the infrastructure in the Yukon Territory is for that, and where you might have partnerships to help develop and bring in the workforce that is needed for the mining industry and some of the support sectors around the mining industry?
Sure. I think you're doing a much better job than we are when it comes to building local capacity on the mining sector. Part of our challenge is when you go through a period of time within that sector, when you don't have operating mines, where's the interest to go and to skill up to work in that field? So, folks that might have been trained up a couple of years ago with our relationship between Yukon College at the time and Delta Junction for the underground mining program, now, as of sort of the last month, they have the opportunity to work in our silver mine that Alexco has. And really, there was a period of time where Alexco was closed. So I think probably the last time they were in operation was they were one of the drivers to make sure this joint venture was in place. When it comes to the service sector, I mean, what we like to, we describe our mining sector the same way that, the mayor of Oregon would probably talk about their ecosystem for a digital economy. It's a big impact for us. It's hundreds of millions of dollars, if not into the billions. And we have an ecosystem similar to yours. We have, great explorers, good junior mining companies. A lot of them, their primary properties are here. So they're very committed to doing work here. Our communities have experienced the good and the bad around the sector for, over 100 years, the same way you folks, had a gold rush, of course we did. And from that point on, there's been mining. So I think, on the ground, we have enough to support. When it comes to building a mine, we look to bring in expertise from Western Canada, because you're not doing it consistently. If it's big steel work or, very specific expertise, we have to bring folks in. But now all of a sudden, during this mandate, we've got 3 operating mines. There was one when we started. And so now there's a lot of jobs. They're great jobs. So now folks can see the opportunity. So I think for us, continuing to work with you to understand how you skill up in your communities so that folks, whether it's, stuff in Southeast that they're working on, or your projects that are in the North as well. Some of the players that work in your jurisdiction, we're really trying to court. We like coal weather miners, Kinross, of course, great company, which they've invested in some projects here. We've got another great Canadian company, Agnico Eagle. These folks get it. They know how to work in the northern part of North America. So again, looking at how they've built capacity. So absolutely, I think we're in a position now where that young woman or a man in grade 7 can look and say, wow, here's the pathway I can take. And then it's up to us to work with our institutions to make sure that the appropriate programs, the trades side of things, I was in meetings yesterday with construction owners. It's across North America, and you probably feel it in Alaska, US, Canada need whatever the sub-trades are. And so we continue to try to build capacity there. We're kind of in a boom of building right now. We need those folks. So we see a lot of opportunities, and for anybody online today, if they see specific opportunities to partner with us and collaborate on getting Yukoners the appropriate skills to work both open pit, underground exploration, we're always open to those conversations.
Great, thank you. With regard to northern and deep water ports, you have the facility at Herschel Island. Do you see that there are any potential tenants, anchor tenants that might be using that port for mining, energy, or other shipping needs in the future?
Yeah, Herschel's, we usually fly in to Herschel. We'll chopper from the mainland, or people will. The port is pretty limited in size. There's been an ongoing conversation. This goes back. The prime minister at the time, I think, was Diefenbaker decades and decades ago, who really got behind the Dempster Highway, which was the road that, of course, brings you from just outside of Dawson City now all the way to Tuktoyaktuk, and it's becoming a bucket list travel excursion, not unlike some of the infrastructure that you have that goes to the northernmost points of Alaska. So lots of excitement around it. Became a tourism draw. But even back to when Diefenbaker was in power, he saw a vision about what was going to happen in the north, and there was lots of ideas kicked around in the north. There's a location called King Point. It's been identified in the past as an area that could be developed. I mean, that would be a big conversation with the federal government or commercial folks primarily too. I mean, this is, we know the conversation continues on about the sensitivity of the porcupine caribou herd. We also have to take all of any sort of development into consideration on our side on that discussion. So the Inuvialuit and the Gwich'in nations in that area also, there hasn't been a lot of engagement on this topic, but I think for us, and you folks see it, I mean, you see big buildup just across the way from where you live. We were quietly watching what was going to happen on the TMAC resources. That was a big one. So that was TMAC was formerly a Newmont mining project. It was acquired by another company. It's a gold mine in Nunavut on the east side of the Arctic. And a Chinese company had put in a request to acquire. It was turned down by our federal government just weeks ago. And all of a sudden, a Canadian company is going to come in and buy it. And I mean, we watched that closely because we didn't really, what was that? What did that mean? Does that mean that now, if that acquisition had gone through, that there would be steady supply chain traffic over the top of Alaska and over the top of Canada to the TMAC location? So I think there's a lot of discussion in this country about it. We weren't part of the decision body, but we certainly weren't surprised. I would say that when the federal government stepped in to turn down the offer. So, I think in the future, it's going to be something that we're going to have to continue to keep a really close eye on as we see traffic continue to grow. We know that, you folks have a deep water port up there. Really, this one area in the Yukon arguably is the only area with a natural deep water bay that could provide this sort of industrial port, and that's really talking about the entire coastline of Canada. So something we're watching. We've been digging up reports that go back a long, long time on this discussion. It's been brought up to me by federal ministers, but we haven't seen a lot of action to date.
Thank you. Talking about the increased transportation activity, human activity in the Arctic always begs the question about what is the capability for search and rescue in Arctic regions. Many of our local communities dedicate a number of assets. This year we honored two Arctic leaders, Oliver Levitt and the late Jacob Adams from the North Slope Borough, for their work in part to develop search and rescue in their communities and borough. Can you speak to what the Arctic search and rescue operations could be in the northern Yukon and related areas?
Yeah, you know what? Very limited, and partially because of we don't have there's a real limited population. To be fair, I think a lot of Yukoners forget the fact that the Yukon has a northern coastline. It's so exotic for most Yukoners, even myself, to be there. We're not used to seeing muskox and beluga whales and having this coastline. That's not sort of how we think about the Yukon, all of us. But that's what's there, and it's beautiful and it's special and it's an amazing, amazing place. I think what we've seen is some presence by, it's really all handled, the responsibility from a Coast Guard perspective it's a federal responsibility. We've seen, more buildup and resources put towards that, more in the Northwest Territories and Nunavut, because really, if you look at the Yukon coastline, it's Herschel is that area that has activity, but the folks that staff the Herschel Island Heritage Site and Research Station, they're all actually individuals that live in the Northwest Territories. There's a relationship with both the Nuviawa and the Gwich'in, and so that's folks from those communities are there. So that's really what we have in place today. We have that community-based grassroots sort of search and rescue out of Inuvik, again in Northwest Territories, and Tuktoyaktuk, and a bigger presence. But I can tell you, there's been definitely a cry across the north for Canada at a federal level to continue to invest in search and rescue capacity, and based on some scary situations that have happened. What is in some cases we have folks being deployed from as you would say the lower 48, but we have south of 60 being deployed that have to travel the entire this entire distance from being down where our provinces are all the way to the north to be able to engage in this activity. So we want to see more presence in the north, and for the federal government as well to understand the uniqueness of what we have here.
Well, a couple of just quick questions. Of course, the pandemic has brought to top of everyone's mind issues regarding food security and food sovereignty. And, we're grateful that the Canadian government has continued to allow essential transport across the Alaska Highway, Trans-Alaska Highway. Can you speak to any particular lessons learned thus far in the pandemic with regard to food security in the Yukon, and what changes you might see in the future with regard to food security for the territory?
We had a flood that washed out the Alaska Highway a number of years ago, and I think that was the biggest wake-up call for us. We quickly found that our version of Myers or bigger chains, within days the shelves were empty, and we quickly found out how quick food gets consumed here in our bigger population areas, and how fragile our system is. We've had an agricultural awakening, I'll say, for the last half a decade. I mean, it's longer, but it's really just growing quickly. And so there's been a lot of private sector investment into livestock, into abattoirs, into poultry, egg production. There's a conversation happening quite a bit with some of your folks, I think in areas like maybe Wasilla outside of Anchorage, where there's been activity, as well as the communities. And we're in a position where we can be moving fresh food into in Haines and Skagway. So we're understanding the federal guidelines that we need to have in place. We don't have a big administration around like your FDA, our version of that. You can imagine we only have a person fly up to do this work. So all of a sudden it's growing quickly, and it's diversifying immensely. So what we saw was a real commitment from our local population to buy local and support their neighbors. So the amount of local food being produced went up. It was all being consumed. This has been a long conversation. I remember hearing a talk back in 2010, and I think it was I think FDA representative Danny Constantine, I think it was, is the name I remember, and hearing about Alaska. $2 billion of food consumed, maybe around that point, 4 to 5% produced locally. We are in the same position, not the same amount of food, but that percentage. So we've really leaned in on food production, looking to get into our economic development department has made it a priority. So we feel that one of the best ways to diversify our economy is getting behind agriculture. So we are in a position now where we have, we're looking to have dairy on site. Really anything that's grown here, people buy it up. It's wild. And, even if it's a dozen eggs and it's a small grower and the price point's a little bit higher, people do it just to support local. So we've learned that we have to take this on ourselves. We learned that, the other problem in our country, I'll just say, is because of the need for imported employment in our agriculture industry, and then shutdowns because of COVID. I mean, the amount of food in our country that was, I mean, you'd get a phone call from the federal agriculture minister saying, you know, can you take 4,000 chickens next week? I mean, it was really wild what played out because there was no ability for the market. And at the same time, we didn't want to disrupt our local market. So we had enough food, we had what we needed, but again, our climate change plan is focused on reducing emissions, and the food security play, it's a great thing. It's just, it's driving a portion of our economy, and people are so passionate about it. So that's kind of where we're at on food growth and production.
Great. Thank you so much. Yes, I think a lot of those same realizations are being manifested here in Alaska as well. And we have a separate food security study group that's looking into many of those same issues. So we certainly understand those inclinations. With regard to the tourism sector, just wondering if you could just check in with us a little bit. Certainly our tourism industry has been greatly impacted by the pandemic, and even the outlook for 2021 seems somewhat spotty in comparison to the robust growth and level of activity that the tourism sector had seen prior to the pandemic. So I'm just curious, because obviously there's strong connections between many of the companies that operate in Alaska, also operate in the Yukon. What's your outlook for tourism, and what are you expecting and looking forward to in terms of recovery?
We're projecting a quicker bounce back, I think, than other jurisdictions in our country. I think we're looking at sort of, you know, if the minister would say probably 2 years. It's a 2-year process to get us back, you know, to where we want to be, and then longer to get us back to where we were. We were sort of number 2 in the country when it came to percentage per capita impact from tourism into our economy. We're about just under 5% of our total GDP was coming from tourism. And so that's where our employment numbers, of course, have been really impacted. Thank God we've had growth in other areas where people at least have the options for good employment. But when it comes to this, you know, of course, we're concerned. From a strategy perspective, and I wanted to have a very open dialogue with you today. I mean, from a strategy perspective, we are really looking at investment, increased investment in our branding. You know, you folks on the phone or on the call don't have to look far to understand the Yukon brand gets used really well by a lot of people, and probably we have to use it better. So, you know, the new Carhartt line of clothing coming out, Yukon Extreme, you know, Chevy Yukon, you name it. It's constantly. So we've looked at other areas. We've looked at Austin, Texas. We've looked at Tasmania. We've looked at New Zealand. We've looked at folks so we know we have an iconic brand, just like you do. And so for us now, we're just making sure that we can maximize the use of that brand. So we have a really extensive process that we're doing, and that's kicked off this year, that we're going to be doing just to help market our jurisdiction. You know, I guess I would say that it's kind of day by day for us right now, trying to figure out what the spring and summer look like short term. And that's why I want to be very, you know, open and honest with you. We know that cruise ships are booking passengers. We know that they're calling our folks here that supply them with services and experiences. But we also know the federal government is going to be in control of when our borders open. And so we have a lot of questions. We know that we will probably get to herd immunity. I don't know exactly what the scenario is in Alaska, but I think our sense is we'll probably get to herd immunity. We'll be probably the first territory, province, or state in North America to accomplish that if everything goes the way it should be. And that should be accomplished within Q1 of 2021. So that's good for our population, but what does it mean for people coming in? And of course, there's still folks that are not going to, that are not comfortable with getting vaccinated. And we think that that's, you know, a significant part of the population. So we got to take that into consideration. So it's, for us, really, we're waiting. We know those seats are being sold. There's been some cancellations by some of the cruise industry. We know, just based on the logistics, they have to stop in Vancouver or somewhere in British Columbia before they come here. We know, so there's a lot of questions on our side about how that's going to play out. I think we'll see increased travel from Western Canada. Talking to our local airline yesterday morning, that's the sense they get. They see bookings starting to ramp up later in the spring, and they are betting on the fact that we'll reduce some of our restrictions and we'll see a lot more Canadians coming to the Yukon. And of course, just like you, big open areas, I think keeping our numbers low, all of those things just give a good sense of comfort for people. But again, we are, we're leaning in financially to ensure that the period of time for us to get to from where we were back to that point is as short as absolutely possible. We were lucky that we rolled out. I touched on it in my notes when I spoke earlier, the business relief program. But I'll just share with you the magnitude of that. Every business in the Yukon, which ended up being 500 companies, if they were in crisis, we covered all of their fixed costs, and we did that from April right through to the end of the summer, and then extended it. And so by doing that, we made sure we supported them. We've been on we're pretty excited about that policy work. 2 or 3 of our policies, we've got actually the head of the World Economic Forum, former executive director at Davos, we've been working with to do the reports coming out on how we handled it. And that's really been helped us shore up the economy. So we paid all those bills, and it was millions and millions of dollars. We had been frugal before that with our budget, so we were in a position to do it. That dropped to about 200 companies by the fall, and that gave us a real good, clear indication of how many tourism companies do. I don't know if everybody will make it through this challenge on the tourism side, but we're making sure they're with us. So the majority of companies, so that when this reopens later, as we think in the summertime, sort of late summer, that our companies are there to continue to help us have a great tourism sector. And of course, give that experience to folks on their bucket list before they go and spend time with you.
Well, we're just a little past 9 o'clock, so I want to take this moment to say thank you so much, Deputy Premier, for your time today. Thank you to your staff for helping to arrange today's session. We appreciate it very much. Just as a reminder to our participants, we will post a recording of today's session on our website, and it will be available on the Arctic Study Group webpage. Deputy Premier, your remarks today just remind us how connected we are with you as a neighbor, and that we share many of the same concerns, have strong economic connections, and so we wish you continued success, and look forward to continuing to partner with not only the governments, the businesses, and the residents of our 2 jurisdictions. So we thank you very much, and wish everyone a good day, and appreciate everybody avoiding the other distraction today to be with us this morning. Thank you to you all.
Thank you so much. And again, if there's further questions, or folks have been, think there's some areas of collaboration, please reach out to us. And again, thank you for giving us an opportunity to share some thoughts today.
Thank you so much. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.